Two black teenagers walked into a car dealership full of excitement and respect. Just minutes later, they were kicked out, treated like they were up to no good. The next day, their billionaire father didn't come to yell. He came to make sure the world saw what really happened. The sun was beating down hard over Tempe that afternoon. It was one of those dry, dragging Arizona days where the heat almost buzzes through the pavement. Malik Townsend had just finished track practice. His gray t-shirt stuck to his back with sweat as he walked alongside his sister, Ayana, across the parking lot of Madison Auto Gallery. They weren't there to cause trouble. Actually, Malik had been talking about stopping by this place all week. "I'm not saying I'm getting a car today," he said, adjusting the strap on his gym bag. "But I just want to see what they have. Maybe something used, just to get a feel for it before my birthday." Ayana laughed, flipping her braids over her shoulder. "You really think Dad's gonna let you drive yourself to school in a two-door coupe?" "Come on," Malik grinned, still walking. "Let me dream a little." The dealership lot was quiet. Sleek silver sedans sat in neat rows under faded flags flapping in the sun. The glass doors shimmered from the heat as the two teens walked in, just like any kids with a few questions and curious eyes. Inside, the air conditioning hit them fast, cool and sharp, cutting right through the heat outside. Behind the front counter, a middle-aged man in a pale blue dress shirt looked up. His eyes went straight to Malik, then over to Ayana. They were dressed clean. Malik wore his athletic gear. Ayana had on a simple dress with sneakers. Nothing flashy. Nothing loud. Still, the man stood up quickly. "Can I help you?" His voice was short, clipped. Malik, always polite, stepped forward. "Yeah, just looking at some cars. Maybe something used. My birthday's next month and, do you have an appointment?" The man cut in, already walking toward them. Malik paused. "No, we don't allow unsupervised minors in the showroom," he interrupted again, throwing a quick glance to a coworker across the room. "Company policy." Ayana's face shifted. "We're not messing with anything," she said. "Still," the man replied, his tone turning colder, "this isn't a hangout spot." He pointed toward the exit. "You can look at the website if you're interested." The silence after that was heavy. Malik opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. Ayana gripped the strap of her bag tight. "We'll leave," Malik said quietly, and they did, no yelling. No arguing. Just a quiet, steady walk back across the parking lot. Ayana held her breath the whole way. She didn't speak until they were sitting in the back seat of the Uber. "That man looked at us like we didn't matter," Ayana said quietly. Malik gave a small nod, barely moving. His jaw was tight. He tapped his phone screen to check how far their ride was, then turned to stare out the window. Ayana watched her brother's reflection in the glass. She didn't like how quiet he'd gotten. He was never the loud type to begin with, but this felt different. This wasn't just being quiet, it was holding something in. She'd seen that same look on their dad's face once before. "You're not going to tell Dad, are you?" she asked gently. Malik didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said after a few seconds. "I don't even know what to call it. It's not like the guy said anything wild. He just didn't want us there." Ayana leaned back in her seat. "Well, it felt wild to me." They didn't say another word for the rest of the ride. They didn't need to. They both knew exactly what had happened. What the man at the dealership didn't know was who he had just kicked out. And by the next morning, he was going to find out. The Uber rolled through the winding roads of Paradise Valley. As they got higher into the hills, the houses got bigger, quieter, and farther apart. Behind the tinted windows of the black SUV, Ayana sat with her arms folded, still frustrated. Malik hadn't said a word. He kept his phone in his hand, screen dark, lost in thought. Their house came into view, a modern home made of white stone, tucked behind a discreet gate. It wasn't flashy, but it had that kind of quiet wealth that only comes from old money, or very smart money. Their father, Charles Townsend, had built his tech empire from the ground up. He started with basic computer repairs back in Flagstaff before launching a data security startup that blew up. Now, his name showed up in Forbes articles and Silicon Valley panel discussions. But around here, he was just Charles. The kids came in through the side door and dropped their things on the bench near the kitchen. The house smelled faintly of cedar and fresh laundry. Mrs. K, the housekeeper, was at the dining table folding towels. "Hey, y'all. Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Ayana mumbled. Malik didn't say a word. From down the hall, they heard their dad's voice. "Malik." Charles appeared a second later, barefoot, wearing a navy polo and holding a tablet. "You're back early," he said, surprised. Malik gave a small shrug. "Didn't end up staying long." Charles noticed right away that something was off, the way Malik's shoulders slumped, how he wouldn't look him in the eye. He looked at Ayana. Her face said more than she probably intended. "What happened?" Malik stayed quiet. Charles put the tablet down and crossed his arms. "Malik." Ayana sighed. "Some guy at the dealership told us we weren't allowed to be there." Charles's expression tightened. "What dealership?" "Madison Auto Gallery," Ayana said. "Off University Drive." "And what exactly did he say?" Charles asked, now fully focused. Malik rubbed the back of his neck. "He didn't want us looking around. Said they don't let minors in without a parent. Accused us of just hanging out." Charles stood still for a long moment, not saying a word. Charles's eyes narrowed, not out of anger, but with a sharp focus. It was that quiet, careful kind of thinking where you could tell he was already planning his next few steps. "What did you do?" he asked. "We left," Malik said. "Didn't want to make a scene." That hit hard. Charles took a slow breath, walked into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. He handed it to Malik before saying anything else. "You did the right thing. You hear me?" Malik nodded once. But then Charles sat down on one of the stools by the counter and looked Malik straight in the eyes. "I want you to remember something," he said calmly. "You are not less than anyone else. I don't care if you walk in wearing your track gear or a full tuxedo. What matters is how you carry yourself. If someone sees you as a problem, that's their issue, not yours." Ayana leaned against the fridge, watching quietly. Charles continued, his voice steady but serious. "But you also need to know this. Staying quiet isn't always the best move. Sometimes when people do small things and no one says anything, they keep doing it. To the next person, then the next." Malik swallowed hard. "So, what are you going to do?" Charles didn't respond right away. He looked at both of them, then stood up and pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm going to have a conversation." Ayana blinked. "With who?" "With whoever's running that dealership," he said, walking out of the kitchen. The rest of the evening moved along with an odd sense of calm. There was no yelling, no chaos, just a quiet kind of focus. Charles made dinner like he always did, grilled salmon, asparagus, and rice. They all sat down and ate together like normal. But something had changed. It wasn't anger in the air, it was intention. That night, Malik lay in bed, staring at the ceiling for a long time before finally falling asleep. He didn't know exactly what his dad meant by a conversation. But he had a strong feeling it was going to speak louder than any argument ever could. Meanwhile, across town, the man at the dealership had no idea what was already on its way. Madison Auto Gallery opened its doors at 9 a.m. sharp. By 8:45, employees were already walking in, car keys jangling, coffee cups in hand, sunglasses still on. The usual Monday morning routine. Derek Holton, the assistant sales manager, leaned against the front desk sipping an iced Americano while scrolling through his phone, didn't recognize half the names showing up in his inbox anymore. Turnover was high. The pay was good, if you could sell. And Derek knew how to sell. By 9:03 a.m., there was already one car in the lot. A navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom, shining bright under the Arizona sun. But it didn't park in a regular spot. It didn't circle around to the back. It rolled straight up to the front doors and came to a stop. Nobody got out at first. Derek glanced over at the receptionist, then stepped out from behind the desk. "You expecting anyone?" he asked. "Nope," she said, eyes locked on the car. Then the door opened, a tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark blazer and sharply pressed slacks. His shoes were polished so well they almost sparkled. Every step he took was steady and precise. No rush, no hesitation. He pulled open the glass door and stood in the entryway for a moment. "Good morning," he said, voice calm but commanding. "I'm here to speak with your manager." Derek paused. I'm the assistant manager. How can I help you?" The man looked directly at him. "You're not who I need." Right then, Kyle Lenson, the general manager, stepped out from a side office. Tall, red-faced, and always looking slightly overwhelmed. "Morning," Kyle said quickly. "I'm Kyle. Can I ask what brings you in today?" The man calmly reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and handed Kyle a business card. Kyle looked down and read the name aloud, slower than usual. Charles Townsend, founder and chairman, TNS Global. Kyle's face began to pale. Wow. Sir, I wasn't expecting. I imagine you weren't, Charles replied, stepping further into the room. I won't take much of your time. Kyle motioned toward his office, shooting a nervous glance at Derek. Well, we can speak in here if you'd like, but Charles shook his head. No need for privacy. This is a public place. I'll only be a few minutes. Kyle nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Of course. Go ahead. Charles glanced around the showroom. Yesterday, 2 teenagers came in here. One of them was my son. The other, my daughter. Kyle blinked. His throat moved like he was trying to swallow something dry. They were told they couldn't look around. That they had to leave. That this dealership wasn't for them. Sir, we have, Kyle started to explain, but Charles raised a hand to stop him. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here demanding compensation. I didn't lose anything yesterday. He paused for a beat. But you did. You lost the opportunity to treat 2 young people the right way. 2 kids who were raised to be respectful, even when that respect isn't returned. A few of the staff nearby had started to slowly move closer, pretending to tidy up papers or wipe down counters. But they were listening. Charles kept going, steady and clear. My children are not here to cause problems. They are thoughtful. They are smart. They were raised with love, with values, and with a strong sense of self. They don't need your approval. But they did deserve to be treated with basic respect, not like they were a threat. Derek stared down at his shoes. The receptionist had stopped typing altogether. Kyle cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. Mr. Townsend, if I may. I'm not looking for an apology, Charles said, cutting him off. Anyone can say sorry. That part's easy. He looked straight at Kyle. What really matters is what you believe when nobody's watching. The choices you make when you think you won't be held accountable. He paused, letting the silence settle around them. Because next time, it might not be my kids who walk in here. It could be someone else. Someone who doesn't have a father with media contacts or a business platform. They'll leave with a moment burned into memory, and you'll never hear about it. But they'll carry that experience for the rest of their life. Charles turned toward the door. But right before he stepped outside, he added, without turning around, you can sell luxury without being small. I hope you figure out how. Outside, a small crowd had started to gather. A couple of people were already recording with their phones. One local reporter stood ready, tipped off by someone. A woman from the news held a microphone. Charles hadn't called anyone. The word had spread on its own. The atmosphere had shifted. Not the temperature, but the energy, the weight of the moment. Charles stepped calmly onto the dealership's front pavement, moving with quiet confidence. His face stayed composed, unbothered by the eyes or the cameras. Off to the side, 2 college students whispered as they filmed. The woman from KXME5 News was already mid-sentence, quietly speaking into her mic, not even sure if she was on the air yet. Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't wait for a podium, he simply stopped near the front doors, adjusted his jacket sleeve, and spoke. I didn't plan on saying anything today. But I know how these things work. If I don't speak for myself, someone else will try to speak for me. He looked up, meeting the small crowd with a steady gaze. My son, Malik, and my daughter Ayana came to this place yesterday afternoon. They weren't loud. They weren't bothering anything. They came here with a bit of excitement in their hearts and a dream in their minds, like any other young person might. His voice remained soft, so soft, people leaned in to hear it. But it didn't waver. They were asked to leave. Not because they broke a rule. Not because they touched something they shouldn't have. But because someone looked at them and made a decision. That they didn't belong. That they were a problem, before they even had a chance to say a single word. A nearby college student holding a phone exhaled slowly, visibly moved. Charles continued, I've worked my whole life to build something that would last. I've always taught my kids that what you build in life isn't just about the money you earn. It's also about how you treat others, especially when no one's watching. It's in the everyday choices, the small things that show your true values. Charles paused, not for effect, but because what he was about to say carried weight. Yesterday, someone looked at my children and didn't really see them. They saw what they assumed they were, and dismissed them just like that. You don't have to yell to be disrespectful. All it takes is making someone feel small, especially in a space they were excited to walk into. Behind the dealership's glass doors, Kyle stood watching, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Charles glanced back briefly, then turned again to face the small crowd gathered in front of him. I'm not here asking for anyone to cancel this business. I don't believe in that. And to be honest, I'm not even angry anymore, I'm just tired. Tired of watching the same thing happen again and again. Good kids being made to feel like they're doing something wrong before they've even said a word. T leaves a mark. And if no one says anything, it keeps happening. By now, a few more people had stopped to watch from the sidewalk. Even a delivery guy across the street had pulled off his sunglasses to get a better look. I came here today because my kids didn't deserve to be treated that way. And because I want them to know, when something's wrong, you don't just stay quiet and swallow it. You face it. You speak up. You stay clear, stay respectful, and don't let it change who you are. Charles stepped toward his Rolls-Royce and placed his hand on the door handle. One more thing, he said. My kids walked out of this place yesterday with their heads held high. That says everything about them, and absolutely nothing about the man who tried to bring them down. He opened the car door, got in, and left, without another word. There was no cheering. No applause. Just silence, as people stood there trying to take in what they'd just seen and heard. It wasn't just about the moment. It was about what it revealed. Inside the dealership, Derek slowly sat down at the front desk. The receptionist had tears in her eyes, though she couldn't explain why. Kyle Lenson stayed by the window, arms stiff at his sides. But even he knew, he'd already lost control of the story. By that afternoon, the first video hit Twitter. Then it spread to Instagram. Then the news. And from there, the story took off on its own. What began as a shaky, vertical phone video recorded by a college freshman named Tori Clemens had already crossed 2 million views on X by lunchtime. The caption read, "This man just walked into a dealership that disrespected his kids and handled it with so much class. I'm actually speechless." People weren't just watching the video, they were picking it apart. Zooming in. Freezing the screen. Analyzing his words. Debating his tone. Arguing in threads. Under one post, a woman from Flagstaff left a comment, "Ready when you are for the next section. Charles Townsend fixed my dad's laptop back in 2001, refused to take a dime. That man's been different from the beginning." That comment stood out online, a simple reminder of who Charles is. But not everyone was so kind. One anonymous user, just an eagle as their profile picture, wrote, "Why didn't the kids just say who their father was? Sounds like they were trying to play the victim." And just like that, the situation started snowballing. By morning, talk shows had picked up the story. Good Morning Phoenix aired a segment titled, "Billionaire Father Calls Out Discrimination at Tempe Car Dealership." Within hours, the dealership's Yelp rating dropped from 4.2 to 2.1. One-star reviews poured in like floodwaters. Rude and dismissive staff. Treated my teenage son like a criminal. Never going back. If you're not in a suit and tie, don't even walk in. They'll kick you out before you say a word. But it wasn't just strangers fueling the backlash. Local activist groups began weighing in, using the story to spark larger discussions about how young people are viewed and the everyday bias they face. Meanwhile, the dealership tried to respond. They put out a 2-paragraph apology on their website and Instagram. "We regret the recent experience that took place at our showroom and are actively reviewing our policies. We strive to provide a welcoming environment to all guests and take these matters seriously." But the comment section made their message loud and clear: "You're only sorry because you got caught. Forget policies, review your employees." This apology has all the warmth of a parking ticket. Behind closed doors, Kyle Lenson was in full damage control. He'd already spoken to 2 different PR consultants. They both told him the same thing: say less. Stay quiet. Do not try to spin it. But the internet wasn't waiting for a strategy. People wanted transparency. They wanted accountability. They wanted names and action. Back at home, Malik and Ayana were dealing with the fallout too. Their phones buzzed constantly. Messages came in non-stop. Some from close friends. Others from numbers they didn't even recognize. Ayana held up one message that made them both laugh for a moment. "Girl, Is that your dad on the news? Tell him to run for office or something. I'm dead." But the light-hearted ones were quickly drowned out by the ugly ones. "Why didn't y'all just walk away? Nobody owes you a car. Not everything is about race. He probably thought you were skipping school. So what? Rich people want sympathy now." Malik stared at his screen, his jaw clenched tight. Ayana nudged his shoulder gently. "Don't read that stuff," she said. But he didn't answer. He kept scrolling. Then, their father walked into the room, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Phone's down," Charles said quietly. "Just for now." Malik hesitated, then finally placed his phone face down on the table. Ayana did the same. Charles sat across from them and leaned in a little closer. "You two didn't ask for this. But sometimes, life decides your story's bigger than just you." Ayana frowned. "But we didn't even do anything. We just walked in." "I know," Charles said quietly. "And that's exactly what makes this so real. You did everything right, and still, someone looked at you and saw something else." Malik stared down at the table, voice low. "Is it always gonna be like that?" Charles didn't rush to answer. He let the question sit there for a moment. "No," he finally said. "But yeah, it'll happen again. And when it does, you'll have a choice. You get to decide how you handle it, who you want to be in that moment." Outside their home, reporters were still hovering. Inside, something deeper than anger was settling in, something like understanding. And understanding doesn't fade away. As the sun slipped behind Camelback Mountain, the shadows stretched across the backyard. It had been 2 days since Charles stood up and spoke at the dealership. 2 long, quiet days filled with headlines, messages, and noise. But here, behind the tall hedges, it was peaceful. Charles stood at the grill, flipping salmon with steady hands. Malik sat nearby on the patio, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, staring out across the lawn. Ayana was off to the side, leaning against the railing, her hoodie pulled up over her face. No cameras. No interviews. Just family. "You know," Charles said, still focused on the grill, "when I was 16, I saved up for 2 years to buy my first car. A '94 Corolla. It was faded red. I had to roll the windows down by hand." Ayana peeked out from under her hood. "Didn't it have no AC?" "That's right. None," Charles laughed. "Phoenix summers nearly roasted me alive. But I loved that car. Not because it was fancy, but because I worked for it." Malik turned his head, finally making eye contact. "Did people ever treat you like they treated us?" Charles gave a slow nod. "More times than I can count. Walked into stores and got followed. Tried to get a bank loan and they laughed me out. I remember one time I sat in a diner in Tucson with my code books in my lap, and they refused to serve me." "Didn't say anything?" Malik asked. "Why not speak up, like you did this time?" Charles flipped another piece of salmon before answering. "Because back then, I didn't think my voice mattered. I thought keeping my head down was the only way forward." He paused, letting the sound of the sizzling grill fill the space. Malik looked down at his hands. "I didn't even want it to turn into something big. I just wanted to look at a car." "I know," Charles said gently. "And that's why it mattered. You weren't trying to make a point. You were just living your life. And somebody couldn't handle that." The 3 of them sat in silence, letting it all sink in. "I'm proud of you," Charles added. "Both of you. You didn't yell. You didn't try to prove anything. You just stayed true to yourselves." Ayana shrugged. "It didn't feel brave." "It's not supposed to," he replied. "Most of the time, being brave just means not backing down from being decent in a world that sometimes isn't." A long silence stretched across the yard. Then Ayana grinned. "So, are we still looking for a car or what?" Charles smiled wide. "I was wondering when one of you would ask." Malik sat up straighter. "Wait, seriously?" Charles tossed a set of keys across the table. They landed softly in front of Malik. "Check the garage tomorrow," he said. "But remember, it's not about the car. It's about who you become while driving it. That means more than anything under the hood." Ayana nudged her brother with a smirk. "You better not crash it on day 1. "Please," Malik shot back. I'm driving it like it's made of glass." Charles let out a real, full laugh. And for the first time in 2 days, the heaviness in the air started to lift. Some stories end with shouting. Others fade quietly. But this one ends with a lesson. Sometimes, the strongest way to fight back is just to keep standing. Calm. Honest. Unshaken. Fin. Si cette histoire vous a fait ressentir quelque chose, partagez-la. Idia n'oublie pas de vous abonner pour plus d'histoires que nous défiant, nous ressemblant et nous repellent que nous sommes vraiment.